Hey everybody, Mr. Judge back again. This is going to be my first recording in my own home, which is now private and completely without any noise issues, so we shouldn't have any problems. Today's video, I actually want to address a very controversial thing that has happened recently. For those who may or may not know, there is a YouTuber named McjuggerNuggets, also known as Jesse Ridgway, who recently had their 5 month, with his wife's consent, had their 5 month developing child. The child was not born, still developing in his mother's womb, terminated or aborted, we could say, because he and his wife found out that the child was going to be born with Down syndrome. And for whatever reason, they decided that they wanted to be very public about their decision for, and I quote, to talk talk about a situation that they, at least according to them, is taboo. And from what I've witnessed, they've caused quite a controversy, with some people supporting what they did, others, condemning it. And today I'm just going to give my viewpoint to it. And in doing so, I'm going to also be showing what Jesse Ridgway actually said in a post in response to this hate. Because the post is so large, I decided to just copy the text and put it in text to speech. So that's what you'll be hearing very shortly. But before we do, I'm just going to say right here and now. My perspective and thoughts on the situation have less to do with whether you're proactive or pro-life or pro-anti-abortion, and it has more to do with concern with their overall reasoning and what their message represents. Basically, the narrative that they basically have put out there, whether they intended to or not, was that aborting a child that was known to suffer disabilities is either an act of mercy or otherwise an understandable choice, considering the difficulties of raising a child with that ability. And they seem to have implied, from what I read, that they thought the child would not be able to develop independently and lead a full on life. And as an autistic, self independent person myself, I take great issue with that assumption, especially considering the fact that the child was not born and therefore, there was no way of actually knowing how badly the Down syndrome would have affected them. It completely ignores the fact that disabilities are now recognized, and advanced treatments are available now, therapies are available, organizations to help manage life is available now. And yet they seem to have completely ignored all that and tried to portray it as if, well, there wasn't going to be much of a quality of life there anyway, so let's just abort it. And and they say they're grieving, and I don't doubt that they are, but it's self-centered in my view. Like, their reasoning is not, well, the child was going to be have a very short lifespan, or the mother was at risk, or anything of that nature. It was solely they didn't want to deal with the responsibility of, and the finance and the struggle it would take to raise a child with such advanced disabilities, and it was not something that they felt they wanted their child to live with. Therefore, they went with abortion. And although they try to portray that in a positive light, from my point of view, it's self-centered reasoning. It's entirely based upon the fact that they didn't want to deal with the situation at all, and they worried about the future that would mostly impact them, even though they try to frame it as, concern for their child. But they didn't. And the reason why I don't buy that argument is, at the end of the day, you could say what you were concerned with, you could say, what you were worried they would face, but in the end, the reality of the situation is the child wasn't born. So you don't know for a fact how right the doctors actually were, how that would have developed, the type of treatment that you could have gotten for your kid, the possibility of them overcoming their Down syndrome. You don't know any of this because you chose to prematurely end your child's life. And again, this is not to get into a is abortion right or is it not right argument. I'm mostly centered on the inherent selfish reasoning behind the act and the betrayal of and the message that it conveys of it's normal to want to abort your kid if they have advanced disabilities that you're not confident in raising. So without further ado, let's listen to what Jesse Ridgway had to say.
I've never seen such hate and vitriol for two people grieving the loss of their unborn child and making an impossible decision. The last 24 hours have exposed a side of humanity that is deeply disturbing. Being called murderous pieces of shit, evil, compared to Hitler, and receiving nonstop death threats. Seeing my 6-year-old dog with stage 4 kidney disease be used as a weapon, manipulating my words and intent in a tweet, or saying we'll regret this decision forever and must repent to God is absolute insanity. If you ever wanted to marvel at the depravity of people online, just check the replies on my latest tweet. It's a shit show of epic proportions. This is reflective of the current world and landscape we're all living in. What's more troubling is a lot of these people use God or Jesus as their justification for threatening us and wanting to cast us into hell seems pretty hypocritical. So many saying they would have kept the child, put it up for adoption, or are suddenly ready to adopt a Down syndrome child. That's great. You can do all those things. However, many of the people throwing stones don't even have children, let alone one with a condition, and most likely will never do the things they say they're going to do.
Well, first off, that's just a deflection, okay? It doesn't matter whether these people truly had children or not, or if the people criticizing you were really going to do what they say they were going to do. The fact still remains, and this is their overall point, is you had the option to keep your child and try to work with what you had, or if you couldn't, you could have at very least after birth give it to adoption. You could have, you know, there's many different alternatives you could have done rather than kill them because they had a disability. And that's the main thing you seem to be trying to deflect from. When you come out and say to people, "Yeah, I terminated my kid because he didn't have the perfect physical health or condition," that results in a lot of anger and justifiable backlash because it would have been a one thing if you were talking about a case where the doctors told you that your son had cell cancer like leukemia, and that even if he was born he would likely only have 5 years left to live, and at that point people could kind of understand the moral dilemma of whether to let the child be born only to suffer and die versus, not have the child born at all to spare them that agony. That's one thing. But you're talking about Down syndrome, not something that a condition that, while it sucks, would have been something that they could have, endured, could have lived a full life, especially with family support, and potentially, not saying that it's definite, but potentially work around it. It is possible to have your disabilities, severe disabilities, with at birth, and then still find ways to get around it, especially with modern adopted psychology care, physical care, mental care. The world is changing very rapidly, Jesse, from a world where, like when I was born, and presumably when you were born, where disabilities were a very hard thing to deal with, help being virtually non-existent. I lived in that era, and I know exactly how terrible it was. That's not the era your child would have been born into. So your argument of like, oh, well, these people are hypocrites because they're using Jesus's name and they don't have kids, which is an assumption on your part, and they wouldn't do what they were going to say they're going to do, has nothing to do with the validity of their criticism, which is that you had many different options available to you to address the fact that your kid had Down syndrome, and ending his life prematurely is by far one of the most less respectable and from a moral standpoint, less humane methods. Because again, I'm not saying to people that you need to be pro-life or you need to be anti-abortion. That's not my point. My point is the centering line of reason and even your justification is entirely centered on it was easier for you to not have the kid rather than thinking about the kid's potential future. And that's my criticism against what you have essentially done. You cannot justify abortion on the basis of, well, my kid had disabilities and I didn't want to deal with it, and therefore it was right for me to terminate it. No, that's selfish reasoning. It's not something you can justify for the child's well-being. It's something that you chose for yourself because it benefited you, not because it benefited the child.
There's been some heinous shit said about my wife and I on some extremely large accounts. It baffles me that there are such trashy ass people who have significant followings. If you can't contribute anything meaningful to the conversation aside from insults, then just don't post. On the other hand, there's been tremendous stories of people who kept their Down syndrome baby, and that's awesome. Very courageous, and they do look very happy. That is your choice, and I support it. This was ours, and we can do that.
Yeah, it is your choice. And yes, you were capable of doing that. But that freedom of choice isn't freedom of consequence, Jesse. When you got to think of the ramifications of your actions, bro, the first thing that you should be thinking about is the fact that if you've literally seen people keep their Down syndrome children and you've seen them actually be extremely happy and that the children are actually living very good lives, then your logic for why you chose to terminate yours loses a lot of sympathy and weight because essentially what you've said is I know that alternatives existed. I know that I could have actually had a healthy family dynamic with my Down syndrome kid, but I've selfishly chose not to do so simply because termination was the more beneficial path for me. Again, the reason why you're facing so much backlash is that you're trying to defend a very selfish mindset that had nothing to do with whether you thought about your own kids' well-being. Your thoughts were only directed towards you and your wife's choice. And so even though you might have a point about people have been saying mean things about you, and one could argue whether or not you deserve that level of hatred. Two things can't be denied. One, you brought that upon yourself because you decided to go public with this. And as is anything that happens in public, you are subject to the public's criticism once you tell them what you're saying. So to tell people, oh, if you don't have anything to contribute to the conversation, don't comment, fuck you. That is not how the conversation works in a public platform. I'm so sick and tired of everyone saying, oh, well, if you can't be nice to me, don't talk at all. It's the fucking public. You aren't supposed to be nice. You are going to deal with people who have intelligence and you're going to deal with dumb people all expressing their same damn views. So stop goddamn telling everyone, hey, if you can't contribute to the conversation, don't talk about it at all. If that's your attitude, don't fucking make it public. Now, the second thing that can't be denied is, you freedom of choice is not freedom of consequence. So when you chose to terminate the kid, the consequence was you now became known to at least a group of people, not saying myself, but a group of people, as a child murderer. You've now become a person who's known that if the kid doesn't meet certain expectations, you are going to terminate them. And that carries stigma. That is nobody's fault but yours. And then the second issue is the consequences. Rather than keep it a private affair, you chose to make it public. You specifically said you made it public because you wanted to address what you viewed to be as taboo. Well, motherfucker, if you knew it was taboo, then maybe you shouldn't be surprised with the level of hatred you got from it. I mean, that's like going to a freaking going to a group of minority people, knowing that, you're not, there's certain racial words you're not supposed to say in front of them because it's considered as taboo, and then saying it out publicly and then being surprised that they kick your ass. And it's like, well, dude, you knew it was taboo. You knew you're not supposed to say that racist shit, and yet you said it anyway. So similarly to this issue of abortion, you knew you weren't supposed to just be so fervently happy at the decision you made to kill your unborn child that you said it to a bunch of people who obviously didn't support it. You call it taboo. And therefore, you said something that was going, and you knowing that it was going to have a profound negative reaction. And so the consequences of you doing that is on you. And then to come about and say, to do all this shit and say you're the victim. No, you're not the victim. Your child was the victim. Because before they were even born, before they even got their first breath of air, they had to be subject to your whim. And unfortunately, your whim was they weren't worthy enough to be your kid because they had Down syndrome. And I hate to put it in that realm of thought and spectrum, but that's essentially the message. Whether you intended it to be that message or not, that's the message people take from that, and that's the message that you give, especially when you're going to say, I know that people can be happy with their kids being kept despite their disabilities. So, and I apologize people how emotional I seem to be getting. It's because I'm autistic, as people know. So when I saw this and I heard this selfish reasoning and I heard him just it's just it really angers me because I can't stand being having gone through the life I've gone through, the trials and hurdles I've gone through, and then be told by people saying, "Oh well, uh, because that person didn't meet my standards, I decided not to keep them," and that just pisses me off because you're basically devaluing the child because of disabilities that aren't even their fault. And I mean, imagine how I would be. I'm 28 years old. Would I be able to have my own house? Would I be able to, have done the things that I've done in life and be a full grown independent adult if my parents had said, "Well, you know what? The kid's going to be born with autism, so let's terminate him." No, obviously not. And we don't know what the child would have been like had it been permitted to be born. You know, it could have been either way. We don't know, and we'll never know now because of these selfish choices. And that's just what upsets me. I know that other people will have a different opinion on the matter. I know plenty of people, some people will disagree with me, perfectly fine to disagree, but it still pisses me the fuck off. And because all I'm hearing is, well, it was my choice. I got to make it, so haha. And it's like there's so much more to it, Jesse, than simply it being your own decision, especially if you're going to make it public for a political agenda, which it seems is what you were doing.
It's very easy to accept the differences between us when it has no actual bearing on your life. What shocked me most of all was that this story has become mainstream news. A couple's abortion is suddenly newsworthy in 2026. There are over 1 million abortions every single year for a myriad of reasons. This is happening on a daily basis and is the most common outcome for trisomy 21, yet this one blows up and people are surprised. The reason this blew up is quite simple. It's because nobody talks about it. I can't blame people for not talking about these vulnerable experiences publicly because you see the disgusting backlash that ensues. It's
Okay, so your argument is essentially, well, plenty of people, other people do it, so why am I a villain for doing it myself? Because you went public with it, dude. The fact that you are trying to gain attention for the fact that you did it is exactly why you're getting that amount of backlash. You could be right. You could be right that millions of people do it every year. That could be an accurate statement of itself. But you know what those millions of people did? They didn't decide to make a story out of it themselves. You literally opened up about it to the public and tried to portray it as a natural and good thing to do, even though, as by your own fucking mouth, it's taboo. It's taboo because most people are divided on the issue. You're going to have people who say it's okay to do it. You're going to have people who say it's not okay to do it. But you can't use the fact that majority of people are doing it to excuse your own behavior because you are the one who drew attention to your own case. And you are the one trying to defend it as, well, it was our choice and what have you. Okay, it was your choice. It's also our choice to say fuck you for it because you literally said, and I don't even think you realize it, but you basically said, fuck you to every goddamn disability there is on the market because if I'm going to if because think of it like this: you terminated your kid, okay, because he had disabilities, okay. So what the message does that send, especially since you want to be public about it, that it's okay to abort your kids because you don't want to deal with their disabilities or potential future problems? And that is a big fuck you to the disabled community because You got to think there's millions of fucking disabled people on the earth, much less in this a million, even more millions in this country, billions on the earth. Okay, imagine all of them gone because the narrative was it was normalized to abort your kid because because they had disabilities and you didn't believe you could take care of them. Imagine how many people would be lost if that occurred. And imagine how many people who are alive today who have overcome their disabilities, overcome their hardships, overcome their issues, and they get told by you essentially, well, that's a cool choice, but you know what? It's perfectly fine to terminate you. It would have been fine to terminate you before you did all of this because we wouldn't be sure if we could take care of you or not, or if we wanted that lifelong commitment, which you assumed it would be. So, I know it sounds like I'm ranting a little bit, but what I'm getting at is whether you know it or not, you said fuck you to the disabled community by trying to say, well, it's our choice and it happens all the year long, whatever. That don't make it fucking right, dude. And, whether it's truly right or wrong is a matter of personal opinion, but you can't go to the public and tell the public, yeah, we eliminated our unborn disabled child and then be praised for it and then expect everyone to be rosies with you. No, it's a highly dividing topic, and many of people are going to see you as Nazis. It could be very well argued that you had the eugenics mindset of, well, he didn't have proper genes and didn't meet the standards that we define as worthy of life, so we killed him. That's the type of way you portray yourself as being, whether you realize it or not, my guy. That's the truth of the matter. Now, people can defend you. You have every right to defend yourself. And you could argue that's not how you thought about it. That's not how you seen it. Fair, Jesse. Fair. But it doesn't take away that the other view is also valid. And you're trying to tell people, so far from what I've heard from you, this happens every year, this happens all the time, we shouldn't be villainized for it, we should, millions of other people do it, we don't deserve all this scrutiny. Yes, you fucking do. Okay? You don't want to be scrutinized for your actions? Don't make it fucking public.
So many mothers have reached out privately commending us on our bravery to speak truthfully about this topic, and we really appreciate that support. We want you to feel less alone in this and less ashamed. There has never been a more important time to speak up and out about the things that matter. Do not let the vocal minority stop you from sharing your truth. To those who have been affected by this or are confronted with a similar situation in the future, we have your back and please feel free to reach out. I'm sure this will follow us a while, especially when we try for a kid again in the near future. A quick aside, be careful where you source your information online.
Yeah, and it should follow you. I mean, this entitlement is unfucking believable, where they literally publicly announced the abortion of their kid, not because he was suffering from life-threatening illnesses, not because the mother was at risk of suffering or possibly death, but because it was going to be difficult than we wanted to imagine taking care of a Down syndrome kid, and then you having the nerve to say no one had the right to call you out as Nazism or eugenics or anything of that nature, even though this is exactly the type of mindset. And then you have the gall to be like, well, this was taboo. This is probably going to follow us even when we have a kid again. You're damn right. Because you know what? One day your kid's going to ask you, hey, did I have a brother or a sister? And they're going to be like, and you're going to have to sit there and say, yeah, you did, but we aborted him before he was born. And then your kid's going to be like, why? And then you're going to be like, well, because he had Down syndrome. And then the kid's going to ask you more questions. It's like, so if I had Down syndrome, would you have aborted me? And also, should children who have Down syndrome be aborted? Like, yeah, you're gonna have to answer those questions, my guy. And quite frankly, with how you're acting right now, I'm scared for that kid, the answer you're gonna give to your own kid, and the mindset he'll adopt later on. I mean, it's selfish, it's cruel, and ultimately self-centered. And because I mean, I can't even imagine what it would have been like if I had been with parents and my parents told me one day, yeah, you had a sister or a brother, but unfortunately we terminated him because he had disabilities. And then when asked, well, if I had disabilities, would you have aborted me? Uh, if they told me yes, that would be fucked up, and if they told me no, then it would be even more fucked up because then that means they're lying to me. And so I can't imagine a kid being put in that situation. But that's a situation you've guaranteed your kid, Jesse, if you ever have one again. Um, and that's just it's just too monstrous in my view. It's just utter selfishness disguised as parental grieving, and yet it was entirely voluntary. It's not like there was an emergency surgery or something of that nature, and that's what pisses me off the most. They're trying to portray it as, well, we were forced into this situation, forced into this difficult choice. No, it wasn't. You were not forced to do anything any more than your kid was forced to have Down syndrome. He had it, it was the situation, and you chose the worst choice possible to terminate their life because you couldn't face the idea of not having a perfect kid or a kid that might have needed special attention from you. And you even say it in your post that it was one of the greatest fears was that the kid wasn't gonna be able to be independent, and you might have to take care of it for the rest of your life. Even if that was the case, guess what? That's still your fucking kid. Would it have sucked? Yes. Would it have been does a lifelong commitment to a kid that can't, you know, raise up to be independent, assuming that would have even been the case, because again, we'll never know. Would that have sucked? Yes. But it's your fucking kid. A kid that did nothing wrong. He was born, he had conditions at birth. That's not something unworthy of life. That's not something you look at and say, you know what, I'm going to fucking just, end it now so that I don't have to deal with your problems in the future. And even if that wasn't your thinking, that's essentially the message. And I truly don't think, which is worse. I don't know which is worse, because it's either you knew that and you intentionally did it anyway, knowing how selfish it was, which makes your victimization crap even more pathetic, or you genuinely didn't think of it that way and thought, well, what you were doing was something that many people might not have thought it was okay, but was an option and therefore justifiable, at which point you're completely blind to the horrible, horrible message you're sending to the disabled community, to people in general, and to parents. And I'm not a parent myself, but that doesn't mean my criticism of you is any less valid, or I can't envision that type of difficult choice. Just because someone is not a parent does not mean they cannot envision themselves in that area, nor does it make their criticism of you for your choice any less valid, which is all you're trying to do. You're trying to deflect blame, and it's not working, my guy.
Whether it's disturbing propaganda accounts, AI, rage bait fearmongers, we're living in a complicated time, and authenticity and empathy will be the most important currencies of the future. Anyway, I can't wait to see all these words get minced and twisted again so people can grow their followings and stir outrage. It's a natural ecosystem after all. Bottom feeders have to get their meal too. Hopefully, our story has inspired others to open up more, and we can all find understanding. At the end of the day, I'm grateful that the discourse about our decision has spread so wide. It's clearly a very important and sensitive topic, one that we need to pay more attention to. Thank you to everyone who has been supportive during this difficult time and defending our choice as parents. It means more than you'll ever know. Red Heart. Also, my wife is a badass. Not only did she go through this trauma, but she's dealing with all the freaks on the internet in stride.
Love you, babe.
Let's look to the future. Baby medium light skin tone.
And here's the thing, right? This goes against the narrative of you being a grieving parents, because I could understand the loss of a child being a very traumatic and horrible ideal, but I mean, listen to your own narrative. The narrative is we're grieving parents, and we're tired of being demonstrously criticized online for a taboo subject that we ourselves made public. And you should feel pity for us because we made the choice to terminate a child that could have had a full on life. And then you want to say, thank you for all the people supporting our choice. Thank you for all the mothers that said it was okay, that we're brave for quelling publicly. Hopefully, more people become public about the premature aborting of their own children, literally just because they may or may not have been disabled. And then you want us to still say you're a victim of horrible things and your wife suffered trauma because of all these horrible things that are happening. You are contradicting your own narrative. If you were truly a grieving parent, why the fuck would you want to make this public? Why the fuck would you want everybody to know, hey, I killed my kid? Why? Why? That is not what a grieving parent would do. Truly grieving parents don't talk about what fucking happened because they don't want to talk about it. That's the whole point of grief. You know, when I lost my dog, when I lost my dogs, I didn't talk about it for everyone far and wide to see. I didn't post about it on social media. I told a few friends in my close circle, yes, but I didn't talk about it. You know why? Because I was fucking devastated. When my best friend when I was 10 years old, my best friend died when he was only 7 years old. And this is the first time I've ever mentioned about it in gotta be over 20 fucking years. And the reason why I never mentioned it was because I genuinely grieved for him. I didn't use his death to gain clout. I didn't use my grief to make everyone feel bad for me, to discuss for me, or anything of that nature, because that's what true fucking grief is. You don't talk about it. You don't glorify it. You don't make it seem like something that everyone should take an opinion on. And more importantly, because I know I've understood grief and gone through it myself, I don't want fucking other people's opinion on it. If I want their fucking opinion on it, I would privately tell them. And he emphasized privately because it wouldn't be something I'd want everyone to know. Um, and I only bring it up now as an example to explain what true grief is. They're trying to make it grief seem like, oh yes, grief is about publicly talking about something most people don't talk about, and it's about making people take divided sides on a controversial issue and to gain support from different groups of people and mothers and whatever. Fucking it isn't. True grief is when you're so devastated you don't want to fucking talk. You're so devastated that you're constantly questioning yourself, is there something you could have done to make things different or to make things right? That's true fucking grief. Um, but what you're doing is you're taking a very unpopular stance and divided stance, saying you're proud of your choices and everybody has to either respect it or leave you alone, and that the hatred that you've gotten is entirely unwarranted and that you didn't do anything wrong. You don't have any sympathy or empathy for people on the other side. You are fully aware of the fact that you could have had a perfectly good family life with your kid, that there could have been chances that you denied your own children, and yet you want everyone to feel sympathy for you as freaking as a couple, as parents. Well, really you weren't a parent because yes, you might have had biological offspring that was in development, but you ended that, so you're not really a parent. You're a would-be parent, if anything would be the more accurate term, but you're just trying to weaponize any quote unquote grief. You're not trying to actually you're not truly feeling grief in the truest of sense, maybe on a superficial sense, but not on a true grief. True grief is something that most people don't talk about, and you're trying to be as loud and publicly with it as you possibly can. And you know what? I used to be a great fan of Jesse Ridgway when I was growing up as a teen and what have you. I'm trying to keep my composure as I say this, although as you can tell, I kind of failed because I've said some curse words and what have you, because this is a rare case where I become emotional. But just honestly, I don't think I can say it anyway. Fuck Jesse Ridgway. Fuck McJuggerNuggets. Because, and I say this not because of any political reason or because I'm taking a stance on pro-life versus, abortion. It's nothing of that. It's fuck him because he and his wife, because essentially I'm a disabled man, and I grew up in the 1990s. Well, not 1990s. I was born in the late 1990s, and I grew up in the early 2000s. But in that time, I still felt stigma. I still felt, the difficulties of growing up with no support system, and I went through discrimination, systematic discrimination. Even groups that were supposed to help me tried to manipulate me and did not, help me out. And I had to actually advocate myself in many cases, despite which I wouldn't have been able to do if I didn't, choose to better myself, as so many people, unfortunately, with my disability, choose not to. And and then to have gone through and grown up all that way, knowing back when there was absolutely no support, basically for my type of disability, which is autism instead of Down syndrome. Uh, and then to have seen and gone through that and to live and see a society where now you got support systems, now you've got therapies, now you've got entire education centered on helping people with those disabilities improve themselves and make up in the world, and then be confronted with a group that not a group, but a couple that live in this 2026 society where help is available and numerous and can really could really have changed their child's issues, and then to be told, well, we chose, instead of even looking up those options or even deciding on those opportunities, we made the decision to terminate our kid because we didn't want to deal with the Down syndrome, completely voluntarily by choice, no medical emergency, no real risk of any danger of any kind, just a purely individualized, selfish choice. And then to hear them say, well, so many people actually have kept their Down syndrome child and they live good, happy lives, and that's great. I support you. Fuck you, motherfucker. Don't support that shit. If you supported that shit, you would have kept your goddamn children. But you chose the other. You chose the other shit. You chose selection rather than embracing your kid's potential downsides. You chose the way of eugenics. You didn't choose the way of compassion, mercy, or any way of that could say, hey, maybe we figure out what to happen if our kid really does have Down syndrome, if it really is as bad as they say, if it really is something that we can or cannot live with, and then living with the consequence, and then dealing with it right then and there. You eliminated any chance for that to have occurred by just saying 5 months, you're out of here, sucker. That is how you basically treated it, and then to sit there and say, oh, we're the victims because everyone's being mean to us for not being ashamed at what we chose to do, and that we are entitled to our choice. Like, fuck you, okay? That was your choice. You can say that all day long. I won't refute that. But your choice has consequences. And one of the consequences is I, along with many people of the disabled community and civil and disabled community advocates, don't respect you now. Because what because basically it opens the question, should I have been aborted, Jesse? Should I have been aborted? Should other people have been aborted just because they had disabilities? Because you made that choice, and then you'll simultaneously say you support people keeping their kids, but you didn't keep your own, and yet you have the gall of calling other people hypocrites. Pisses me off, man. Pisses me off. Well, guys, that's my rant on this video. That's what I wanted to address. Anybody I offended, I apologize. Anybody who agrees with me, cool. Please like, comment, and subscribe.